My wife slept with her lover. In our home, what she didn't know was that I'd already triggered a plan. She couldn't escape. The moment I found the cracked photograph frame lying face down on the kitchen floor, I knew everything was unraveling faster than I ever imagined. I'm Mark, 38 years old, a man who once believed in second chances, in rebuilding a broken family. 2 years ago, I married Lisa, a woman I thought I could trust, a woman who promised a fresh start for both of us, and for my son, Jamie, who's just 10. Our home, a modest 2-story with peeling paint and a creaky staircase, was supposed to be a sanctuary. But lately, the air felt heavier. The silence between Lisa and me thicker, like a storm waiting behind closed doors. Every morning, I'd watch her move through the house with a strange detachment, pouring coffee without looking up, scrolling through her phone with a furrowed brow, her fingers trembling just slightly when she thought I wasn't watching. The small things started piling up, the way she'd quickly shut down her laptop when I entered the room, the sudden late-night texts she'd hastily hide away, the scent of a perfume that wasn't hers lingering faintly on the pillow beside me. I tried to tell myself it was just stress, the pressure of blending our lives, but even Jamie noticed. One evening, he asked me quietly if Mommy was sad or mad, and I didn't have an answer. Lisa's laughter, once a bright thread in our daily routine, had become rare and hollow. Our conversations, once easy and filled with hopes, now bounced off walls like echoes, short, clipped, and guarded. The tension wasn't just between us, it had started to infect every corner of our home. The kitchen table where we used to eat together was now littered with unopened bills and half-empty wine glasses. I caught her watching me sometimes, her eyes darting away when I met her gaze, like she was carrying a secret too heavy to bear. It wasn't just the silence or the coldness. It was the feeling that I was no longer the man she married, that she had slipped through my fingers, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. And then, that photograph frame on the floor, shattered glass reflecting a fractured trust I wasn't ready to confront. I knew something had changed irrevocably between us, but I didn't yet understand the full extent of the betrayal lurking just beneath the surface. That night, as I stood in the dim hallway staring at the broken frame, I made a decision. Whatever Lisa had done, whatever secrets she was hiding, I was no longer a passive bystander. I had already set a plan in motion, one she would never see coming, a trap closing in quietly but inevitably. And as I heard footsteps upstairs, soft and deliberate, I realized she was about to cross a line from which there would be no return. The nights had grown longer, but sleep was a stranger I couldn't welcome. I found myself sitting on the edge of our bed, watching the dim glow of the street lamp outside filter through the curtains, casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the room. Lisa lay beside me, her back turned, the space between us wider than the mattress itself. The soft hum of her phone buzzing in the dark was the only sound breaking the silence, and each time it lit up, my heart sank a little more. It wasn't just the phone, though the quick flick of her thumb to hide messages when I glanced over made me feel invisible. It was the way she moved through our shared life, like a ghost of the woman I once knew. At dinner, she'd sit across the table, eyes fixed on the screen, barely tasting the food, while Jamie animatedly talked about his day. I tried to catch her eye, to anchor her back to us, but she was already miles away, nodding absent-mindedly without really listening. The warmth that once filled our kitchen was replaced by a cold, mechanical routine, as if we were roommates passing time rather than a family. One evening, I caught her standing by the window, staring out with a distant look, lips pressed tight as if holding back words that could shatter everything. I stood there for a moment, wanting to reach out, but the weight of her silence was suffocating. Instead, I retreated to the hallway, my footsteps muffled against the worn carpet, feeling like an intruder in my own home. The small gestures hurt the most. The way she'd close the bedroom door softly but firmly whenever I approached. The subtle tightening of her shoulders when I tried to brush her hair away from her face. The way she'd sigh heavily and turn away when I asked about her day. Each moment was a needle threading through the fabric of our connection, leaving me raw and exposed. I found myself shrinking, my voice growing softer, my presence less certain. Even Jamie seemed to notice the change. One afternoon, he tugged at my sleeve, his small face creased with worry. "Dad, why doesn't Mommy smile like she used to?" he asked, his words breaking through the fog of my confusion. I had no answer for him, only a hollow ache in my chest. The house itself echoed our distance. The living room, once cluttered with laughter and shared stories, now held only the sound of the ticking clock and the occasional creak of the floorboards. Lisa's favorite chair was empty, the cushion indented with her absence. On the coffee table lay a forgotten book, its pages marked halfway through, a silent testament to moments paused and abandoned. At night, when the silence pressed in hardest, I'd lie awake, tracing the lines of the cracked photo frame in my mind, wondering when the fracture had first appeared, how deep it ran. The betrayal wasn't just in the actions I suspected, it was in the erasure of the woman I loved, replaced by someone distant and unreachable. And beneath it all, a growing, unsettling truth whispered to me. The life I thought we were building was slipping beyond my grasp, and no matter what plan I'd set in motion, something fundamental was already breaking apart. Quietly, irreversibly. That evening, the house felt colder than usual. I was in the living room, idly flipping through channels, when the sharp buzz of Lisa's phone cut through the quiet. It was a sound I'd come to dread. Without thinking, I stood and moved toward the kitchen, drawn by a sudden unease. The light under the doorway spilled into the hallway, flickering as if hesitant to reveal what lay beyond. I stopped just outside the kitchen, my breath catching as I noticed the door frame was cracked, something I'd never paid attention to before. Lisa wasn't there, but the phone buzzed again, louder this time. My eyes drifted to the counter, where her phone lay abandoned, screen lit up with a message preview. I moved closer, heart pounding, and glanced down. The notification wasn't from any friend or family member. It was from a name I didn't recognize. Ryan. The message read, "Can't wait to see you again tonight. Our place is ready." My hands trembled as I locked the screen and picked up the phone. My fingers swiped, searching for more, and then I saw it. A series of texts, timestamps marking late nights, casual conversations slipping easily into something far too intimate. There was no hiding it now, no chance to pretend. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed from upstairs. I froze. Lisa appeared at the top of the stairs, her face pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and guilt. She didn't speak. Instead, her gaze dropped to the phone in my hand, and I saw the moment she realized the trap had snapped shut. My chest tightened, a cold knot settling deep inside me. I felt like the floor beneath me had disappeared. The air was thick, every breath sharp and shallow. My legs wobbled, threatening to give way. But I stayed rooted, unable to tear my eyes away from her. Lisa's fingers twitched, and then she whispered, "Mark, But the words caught in her throat. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want apologies. I just wanted to understand how everything I'd believed in had crumbled so completely. The silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, until I finally spoke, voice barely above a whisper. "Why, Lisa? Here. In our home?" Her eyes flickered with a flicker of shame, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. But instead, she straightened, a cold resolve settling over her features. "It's complicated," she said, voice tight. I nodded, the truth sinking in like ice water. The woman I'd married was no longer here, not really. And the life I thought we had was gone, replaced by something I couldn't fix, couldn't undo. As she turned and disappeared up the stairs, the phone slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. I sank to my knees, the sound echoing in the silent house. The line between us had shattered completely. There was no turning back now. The days that followed felt like walking through a dense fog, each moment heavy with an invisible weight pressing down harder than the last. Lisa moved through the house with a new kind of purpose. Cold, calculated, almost rehearsed. It was as if the familiar contours of our home had shifted beneath her feet, and she was navigating a different map altogether, one I couldn't read or follow. One afternoon, I found myself standing in the hallway just outside Jamie's room when I overheard her voice on the phone. Low, urgent, and unmistakably guarded. The words were clipped, but the tone spoke volumes. Promises made, plans confirmed, a future sketched in secrecy. I caught a glimpse of her profile through the cracked doorframe, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for an escape route, while her fingers clenched the phone like a lifeline. The conversation ended abruptly, and she slipped into the living room, her face carefully blank, but the tension in her shoulders betrayed her calm facade. That evening, I noticed the small changes that felt like deliberate cuts rather than mere neglect. The coffee cup she used wasn't mine. It was a cheap plastic one, discarded carelessly on the counter. The groceries I'd bought, her favorites, remained untouched, wilting slowly in the fridge. Jamie asked if Mommy would join us for dinner, his voice hopeful and fragile. Lisa's silence was the only answer, and I saw the disappointment flicker across his young face before he looked away. At night, the space between us grew colder still. I caught her watching me from across the room, eyes sharp and unreadable, as though measuring me against some invisible standard I could never meet. She no longer avoided my gaze. Instead, she held it with a steady intensity that felt less like connection and more like a challenge. I wanted to speak, to bridge the widening chasm, but words felt useless, too small, too fragile for the storm gathering around us. One morning, as I passed by the kitchen, I noticed a note taped to the fridge in Lisa's handwriting. "Don't wait up." The words were simple but carried a weight that settled deep in my chest, a silent declaration that I was no longer part of the equation. I crumpled the note slowly, the paper folding like the trust between us, once whole, now torn and wrinkled beyond repair. Then there was the night Jamie fell asleep in my arms, whispering questions about why Mommy seemed so different, so distant. His innocence was a jagged shard cutting through the heaviness, and I found myself promising answers I didn't have. The helplessness was suffocating, a pressure that tightened with every passing hour. The house itself seemed to rebel against me. Doors that used to swing freely now creaked shut with a finality that echoed my growing isolation. The garden, once a place of laughter and weekend barbecues, lay overgrown and neglected, much like the life we'd tried to nurture. I caught Lisa leaving the house late one night, slipping out without a word, the porch light flickering off behind her like a signal extinguished. My attempts to confront the situation were met with veiled deflections. When I asked about the late-night absences, she offered vague excuses, work stress, a friend in need, answers that felt rehearsed, like lines in a play I'd been cast in without consent. I saw the way her phone screen lit up in the dark, the familiar name, Ryan, flashing briefly before she snatched it away. The sting of betrayal was raw, but beneath it simmered a deeper confusion. Was I seeing the full picture, or just the fragments she wanted me to see? Late one evening, I found a receipt tucked between the cushions of the couch, an unfamiliar hotel name, a date just days past. The ink was smudged but unmistakable, a physical proof of secrets kept in shadows. My mind raced with possibilities, but fear held me back from asking, from demanding the truth I so desperately needed yet dreaded. The final fracture came when Jamie overheard a hushed argument between Lisa and someone over the phone. Her voice was sharp, clipped, a stark contrast to the warmth I remembered. The words I caught, "Not yet. Keep it hidden. Soon," hung in the air like a warning. Jamie's wide eyes met mine later that night, silent questions swimming in their depths. I swallowed the lump in my throat, knowing that silence was no longer an option, but action felt like stepping into a storm I wasn't sure I could weather. As I stood alone in the dim hallway, the weight of the broken frame still heavy in my mind, I felt the slow, inevitable tightening of the noose I'd begun to pull around us. The house, once a sanctuary, had become a cage, one with walls closing in silently, but relentlessly. Then, in the stillness, a faint creak echoed from the floor above, a deliberate, measured step that didn't belong to Lisa. The hallway light flickered once, twice, and went dark. In that pregnant moment of silence, I realized the trap I'd set was no longer just mine to control, and whatever was coming next would break everything wide open. The night Lisa finally crossed the line came without warning, but the signs had been building like a storm I refused to see. Jamie was asleep upstairs, and the house lay drenched in silence, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak from the settling walls. I was in the living room, nursing a glass of whiskey I didn't really want, when the front door slammed open, with a force that shook the faded welcome mat. Lisa stepped inside, but she wasn't alone. Behind her, a man I'd never met trailed, A stranger whose casual grin cut through the thick tension like a blade. Ryan. The name I'd seen so many times flickering on her phone, now standing in my home, uninvited and unapologetic. Lisa's eyes flicked toward me, a mixture of defiance and exhaustion, before she turned back to Ryan. "Mark," she said, voice sharp. "I didn't think you'd still be here." I stood up, the glass slipping from my fingers and shattering on the floor, shards scattering like the fragments of my trust. "What the hell, Lisa?" My voice was low but steady, the anger simmering beneath the surface. "You bring him here, in our home, in front of Jamie's room?" Ryan laughed, a short, dismissive sound that made my skin crawl. "Relax, man. We're not here to fight. Just thought it was time you knew what's really going on." "What's going on?" I demanded, stepping closer, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. "You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around, hiding texts, leaving the house without a word. And now this." Lisa's jaw tightened. "It's not that simple." "Oh, but it is," I snapped. "You chose him over me. Over this family." The words burned as I said them, raw and real. "And you thought you could just keep living this double life under my roof." She looked away, but Ryan wasn't finished. "Look, Mark, I get it. It's messy. But Lisa needed out. She needed something real, something you couldn't give her anymore." I felt the betrayal twist inside me, bitter and cold. "So this is it? You're just going to walk away? Leave Jamie with nothing but broken promises and silence?" Lisa's eyes met mine then, and for a fleeting second, I saw the woman I once loved, the one who laughed freely, who dreamed with me. But it vanished as quickly as it came, replaced by a hardness I didn't recognize. "Jamie will be fine," she said quietly. "He'll have me, even if you can't accept it." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My son, my boy, caught in the crossfire of a war I never wanted to fight. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat, trying to steady my voice. "You don't get to decide that alone." Ryan stepped forward, his grin fading. "Maybe it's time you step back, Mark. Let Lisa live her life. Or are you going to keep pretending everything's fine while it falls apart?" The room seemed to close in, the walls pressing down as the weight of their words settled over me. I wanted to scream, to break something, to claw back control. But all I could do was breathe, slowly, painfully. Lisa turned toward the stairs, her footsteps light but final. "I'm leaving tonight," she said without looking back. "You can either fight me or accept it." "But this," she gestured around the house, "this isn't a home anymore." I stood frozen, the shattered glass at my feet reflecting a fractured future. The man I'd been, the husband, the father, was slipping away, replaced by someone raw, uncertain, and alone. And as the front door clicked shut behind her, the silence that followed was heavier than any words. I was left standing in the dark, the question burning hotter than ever. Fight for what's left, or let it all go, and lose everything in the process. The morning after Lisa left, the house felt strange, like a body without its heart. I woke up before dawn, the room colder and emptier than it had been in years. The bed was vast, the sheets untouched on one side, and I found myself hesitant to crawl under the covers, as if invading a space that no longer belonged to me. Instead, I sat on the edge, the wood creaking beneath me, and stared out the window at the gray sky, watching the first light struggle to break through the clouds. My routine shifted almost without thought. I started leaving the house earlier than usual, slipping out before Jamie stirred, hoping to avoid the questions he didn't yet know how to ask. The kitchen was the first place I began to avoid. The coffee machine sat silent on the counter, dust gathering on the surface where Lisa's favorite mug had once rested. I'd pour myself a cup from a thermos I'd filled at work, taking it with me on long walks around the neighborhood, pacing the cracked sidewalks with no destination in mind. The bitter warmth against my lips was a small comfort, a distraction from the emptiness that seemed to echo inside my chest. I noticed the lines around my eyes deepening, the dark circles that no amount of sleep could erase. My reflection in the bathroom mirror was a stranger, pale, unshaven, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. I ran my fingers through my hair more often, tugging at the knots as if trying to unravel the tangled mess of emotions knotted inside me. Some nights, I'd catch myself staring at my phone, hovering over Lisa's name, fingers trembling but unwilling to make the call. The silence that followed was louder than any argument we'd ever had. Mealtimes became exercises in solitude. Jamie and I ate together, but the space between us at the table felt wider than ever. I'd push my food around my plate, swallowing bites without tasting them, my appetite dulled by the weight pressing down on my stomach. Jamie's chatter was a fragile thread trying to stitch us back together, but I often found myself nodding absently, lost in a fog of regret and anger. Sometimes, I'd glance at the empty chair across from me and flinch, the memory of Lisa's absence hitting like a physical blow. The living room, the heart of so many shared moments, grew quieter. I avoided the armchair she once claimed, its fabric worn but still holding the shape of her. Instead, I sat on the couch's edge, back rigid, hands clenched in my lap. The television provided background noise, but it never quite filled the silence. I found myself reaching for the remote less and less, the programs blurring into one another as my mind wandered to what could have been. Work became a refuge and a prison all at once. I arrived early, leaving late too, burying myself in tasks that required focus, but not emotion. The office lights felt harsh, the hum of computers a constant reminder that life outside those walls was unraveling. I declined invitations from colleagues, canceling plans with a quick excuse or no explanation at all. Phone calls from friends went unanswered, their concern evident in the messages left on my voicemail. I was too tired, too raw, to face anyone's pity or well-meaning advice. At night, sleep was elusive. I'd lie awake, the ceiling a pale canvas for the shadows cast by passing cars outside. My fingers would twitch, reaching out instinctively for a hand that wasn't there. Sometimes, I'd get up and wander the house, the creak of floorboards beneath my feet, the only sound breaking the stillness. I caught myself opening doors I usually avoided, the bedroom closet, the hall where the broken photo frame still hung crooked on the wall, and then closing them quickly, as if the memories might spill out and drown me. One afternoon, I found myself sitting at the small cafe down the street, nursing a cup of black coffee far too bitter for my taste. Across from me sat my old friend, Daniel, someone I hadn't seen in months but who'd always known when to show up. He didn't ask questions. He just listened as I spoke haltingly about the cracks spreading through my life. No advice, no judgment, just a steady presence that felt unfamiliar but necessary. When I left, the air outside felt a little less heavy, though the weight inside hadn't lifted. Some nights, I caught glimpses of Jamie asleep, his small chest rising and falling peacefully, and the ache in my heart twisted into something sharp and raw. I whispered apologies into the dark, promises I wasn't sure I could keep. The house was silent around us, but the quiet was no longer suffocating. It was waiting, patient and uncertain, like me. One evening, as I sat alone on the porch, the cool breeze brushing against my face, I found myself tracing the cracked edges of the photograph frame I'd shoved into a drawer months ago. For the first time since everything fell apart, I didn't feel the urge to hide it. Maybe, I thought, some fractures could be mended, not perfectly, but enough to let the light in. The road ahead was unclear, the path jagged and uncertain. But in that fragile moment, I sensed the faintest flicker of something new, a tentative step toward whatever would come next. The morning light slipped through the half-open blinds, casting uneven stripes across the kitchen table where I sat. Hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. Jamie was already at school, and the quiet seemed less oppressive today, though that might just have been my imagination. For the first time in weeks, I didn't just stare blankly at the empty chair across from me. Instead, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in months. My sister, Emily. Her voice was warm and familiar when she answered, but I could hear the cautious edge beneath her usual cheerfulness. "Mark, it's been a while. How are you holding up?" I hesitated, the words caught in my throat, but I forced them out. "Not great. I think I need help." Emily didn't hesitate. "I'm glad you said that. I know someone. My therapist. She's helped me through some tough times. I can set up an appointment for you." Sitting there, I felt a small crack in the wall I'd built around myself. "Okay," I said softly. "Yeah, let's do that." That afternoon, I cleared the clutter off the kitchen counter. the unopened bills, the crumpled note from Lisa, and wiped the surface until it gleamed. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A small act of reclaiming control over a space that felt like it was slipping away. I found myself lingering in front of the mirror longer than usual, running cold water over my face, trying to shake the exhaustion from my eyes. Later, I sat down with Jamie to help him with his homework. His small fingers traced the letters, and he smiled when I corrected a tricky spelling word. "Thanks, Dad," he said quietly. For a brief moment, I felt the weight of the past weeks lift, replaced by something fragile but real, a connection I was determined to nurture. That evening, I attended my first therapy session. The room was softly lit, the walls lined with books and calming artwork. Dr. Harris, a woman in her early 40s with kind eyes, welcomed me without judgment. At first, I stumbled over my words, unsure how much to reveal. But as the minutes passed, the tight knot inside me loosened just a little. I spoke about the broken frame, Lisa's absence, Jamie's confusion, and the gnawing ache of betrayal. She listened patiently, offering reflections that didn't demand answers but invited understanding. After the session, I walked home through the quiet streets, the cool air filling my lungs. The sky was streaked with pink and orange, the kind of sunset that feels like an ending, but also a beginning. I realized that asking for help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a first step toward rebuilding something I thought was lost. The next day, I set boundaries I hadn't dared to before. When Lisa called unexpectedly, my heart leapt, but I didn't pick up. Instead, I let the call go to voicemail, and later listened to her message. A brief, hesitant apology with no promises. I didn't respond. It was the first time I refused to be pulled back into the chaos, choosing instead to protect the fragile peace I was beginning to create. That evening, Jamie and I cooked dinner together. We chopped vegetables, laughed over spilled sauce, and made a mess of the kitchen. For a while, the house felt warm again. Not because Lisa was there, but because we were carving out a new space for ourselves. I caught Jamie's eye and saw hope flicker in his smile, a reminder that even amidst loss, life presses forward. Still, the shadows lingered. I found myself wrestling with old loyalties, memories of Lisa's laughter, promises made in better times, the family I'd dreamed we'd be. But alongside that pain, a new priority emerged: Jamie's well-being and my own healing. It was messy and uneven, a constant tug-of-war between what was and what could be. One night, after Jamie was asleep, I sat on the porch and jotted down thoughts in a notebook I'd bought on a whim. I wrote about anger, forgiveness, fear, and hope, words that felt too big but necessary. I didn't have all the answers, but I was learning to ask better questions. As the weeks passed, I met with Dr. Harris regularly, each session peeling back layers I hadn't realized were there. I reconnected with old friends, accepting invitations I once declined, rebuilding a support network that felt shaky but real. I found solace in small routines, morning walks, journaling, quiet dinners with Jamie, that grounded me in the present. And though the house still held echoes of what was lost, it also held spaces waiting to be filled with something new. Something uncertain, yes, but alive. One evening, as I closed the front door behind Jamie and watched him wave goodbye on the school bus, I felt a steady resolve settle over me. The road ahead was uncharted, filled with pain and possibility in equal measure. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was beginning to live again. The late afternoon sun spilled a muted glow through the half-closed blinds, casting long shadows across the living room where I sat, fingers nervously tapping the armrest of the worn sofa. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles when words have been left unspoken for too long. Jamie was at his friend's house, the house finally quieter but somehow heavier without the boys' laughter filling the space. I heard the soft click of the front door before Lisa stepped inside, her presence filling the room with a sudden, awkward stillness. She closed the door behind her without a word, and stood there, her eyes flickering around as if searching for something familiar in a place that had become a stranger to her. "Mark," she began, voice tentative, barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, bracing myself. "We need to talk." I nodded slowly, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. "Yeah, we do." She eased herself onto the armchair opposite me, folding her hands tightly in her lap. The silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable, until I finally broke it. "Why, Lisa? Why here? Why now?" My voice cracked, betraying the calm I wanted to hold on to. She looked down at her hands, then back up, eyes glossy but resolute. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was helping myself, trying to find a way out of a place where I felt trapped." I clenched my jaw, the sting of betrayal still fresh beneath the surface. "You brought him into our home, into Jamie's life, without telling me. Without any warning." Lisa's breath hitched. "It wasn't like I planned it that way. Things just happened, and I was scared. Of losing you. Of losing Jamie. Of losing myself." Her words were messy, tangled. The kind of honesty that cuts deeper because it's so real. I wanted to reach across and touch her hand, to find some remnant of the woman I loved. But my arms felt heavy, as if weighed down by years of broken promises. I stayed silent because I thought if I said something, it would all fall apart. "But it already did," she admitted, voice barely steady. "I was trying to survive, maybe selfishly." We sat in silence again, the room filled with the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, every breath shallow and fast. "I'm not sure what I want now," I confessed, finally meeting her gaze. "I don't know if I can forgive or if I even want to. But I know I can't keep pretending this never happened." Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. "Neither can I." The honesty between us was fragile, a threadbare lifeline stretched thin but still holding. There were no grand declarations, no promises of forever. Just two people laid bare, grappling with the wreckage of a shared past and the uncertainty of what might come next. I stood up, the ache in my chest tightening. Maybe we need time. Maybe space. For Jamie's sake, we have to figure out how to move forward, even if that means apart. Lisa nodded slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just a fraction. "I want that too. For him." As she rose to leave, the weight of the moment settled like dust around us. The door closed softly behind her, leaving the house quiet once more. But something had shifted. The truth was out, raw and unfiltered, and though the road ahead was anything but clear, the air felt lighter somehow. I sank back onto the sofa, fingers still trembling, and stared at the cracked photo frame resting on the shelf. The fractures were still there, jagged and stubborn. But for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to hide them away. The house was still broken, but maybe, just maybe, that was where it had to start. The day after our conversation, the house felt like a fragile glass sculpture, still whole, but trembling with the slightest touch. I woke to silence, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel deliberate. Jamie was already at school, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't rush to check my phone for messages or missed calls. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, the cracked photo frame catching the morning light, its jagged edges sharp but somehow beautiful in their imperfection. I poured myself a cup of coffee from the machine, Lisa's favorite blend, and took it slowly, savoring the warmth that spread through my hands. It was a small act, but it grounded me. The kitchen, which had become a battlefield of silence and resentment, felt momentarily like a place where I could breathe again. Later, Jamie came home with his backpack slung over one shoulder, his face carrying that delicate mix of childlike hope and grown-up worry. He didn't ask about Lisa right away, just dropped his bag by the door and flopped onto the couch beside me. We didn't speak much at first. Sometimes words felt like too much, too soon. Instead, we played a board game, a dusty old set we'd found in the closet months ago and forgotten. Jamie's laughter, tentative but genuine, was a balm I hadn't realized I needed. Still, the ease was fleeting. When Jamie mentioned his mother's name, his voice soft and uncertain, I felt a knot tighten in my throat. "Do you think she'll come to my school play?" he asked, eyes wide. I hesitated, swallowing the mix of anger and longing that bubbled beneath the surface. "I don't know, Bud," I said finally, voice gentle. "But I'll be there, cheering the loudest." That evening, I found myself staring at the empty chair across from me during dinner. The food tasted bland, and I poked at my plate, lost in thought. Jamie was quieter than usual, his usual chatter subdued. At one point, he glanced up and caught my eye. "Are you okay, Dad?" he asked, vulnerability threading through his words. I forced a smile, not ready to admit how raw everything still was. "I'm getting there," I said, though even that felt uncertain. The days blurred into each other. I slipped into new routines, morning walks with Jamie before school, quiet evenings filled with half-hearted attempts at conversation, and long stretches of solitude where the weight of Lisa's absence pressed down hardest. There were moments when I caught myself reaching for my phone, fingers hovering over her name before pulling away. The temptation to bridge the gap was strong, but I resisted, knowing that healing wouldn't come from clinging to the past. Work became both refuge and challenge. Colleagues noticed the shadows under my eyes and the stiffness in my movements. I accepted their offers of help with a hesitant nod, but kept most conversations surface level. The office, once a place of distraction, now felt like a stage where I was performing a role I barely remembered how to play. One afternoon, as I sat at my desk, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. The words were brief. "I'm sorry. I don't expect anything. Just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you and Jamie." I stared at the screen, my heart a chaotic mix of relief and pain. I didn't reply. Instead, I set the phone down, letting silence hold the space between us. At home, the cracks in our fragile attempts at normalcy showed in small ways. Jamie would sometimes retreat into his room for hours, the door closed tight as if shutting out the world. I'd hear muffled sobs or whispered frustrations, and I'd hesitate outside, torn between respecting his space and wanting to comfort him. There were nights when I lay awake, the house still except for the occasional creak of floorboards, wondering if I was failing him. Then there were the unexpected moments of kindness. Jamie slipping his hand into mine during a particularly tough homework session, or leaving little notes on my pillow. "Dad, I love you." These small gestures pierced the fog of despair, reminding me that even amidst the wreckage, love persisted. Lisa's visits became sporadic and cautious. When she did come, the air was thick with unspoken questions and tentative steps toward rebuilding trust. We'd sit in the living room, the photo frame lurking silently on the shelf, and talk around the edges of what had been broken. Sometimes the conversations ended in tears or angry silence. Other times, in fragile smiles and promises to try harder. One afternoon, Jamie asked if we could all go to the park together, a simple request that felt monumental. I agreed, and when Lisa arrived, there was an awkwardness that only time could soften. Watching them play on the swings, I saw a glimpse of the family we once were, and a hint of what might still be possible. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was a beginning. Still, setbacks were inevitable. Arguments flared over trivial things, the way Lisa left the dishes, or how I handled bedtime routines. Old wounds reopened, and the weight of past betrayals lingered like shadows refusing to fade. I found myself questioning whether the fragile threads holding us together could withstand the strain. Yet, amid the chaos, I learned that healing wasn't linear. It was a messy, uneven path filled with steps forward and stumbles back. I discovered that forgiveness might not come all at once, but in moments. Small, imperfect moments that, over time, could weave a new fabric strong enough to hold us. One night, as Jamie slept peacefully between us, I sat on the porch, the cool air brushing against my skin. I traced the cracked edges of the photo frame with my fingers, no longer wanting to hide its flaws. Maybe, I thought, this brokenness was where healing began. Not in forgetting what was lost, but in embracing the fractures and learning to live with the scars. The road ahead remained uncertain, tangled with pain and hope alike. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker, a fragile, stubborn light that whispered of new beginnings waiting just beyond the horizon. The weeks that followed our tentative attempts at moving forward were neither smooth nor easy. There were days when the weight of everything, Lisa's betrayal, the fractured family, Jamie's confusion, felt almost unbearable. But there were also moments, small and unassuming, that reminded me why I kept going. Looking back now, I realize how much I underestimated the complexity of what we were facing. At first, I thought the hardest part was uncovering the truth, catching Lisa with Ryan, confronting her, and living through that initial shock. But the real challenge was in what came after, navigating the aftermath, learning to live with the pain, and deciding what kind of future was possible, even if it looked nothing like what I'd imagined. I remember the cracked photograph frame, the symbol of everything broken between us. For the longest time, I hid it away, unwilling to face the fractured image it held. But over time, I came to understand that breaking wasn't the end. It was a painful part of the process. A stark reminder that trust can shatter, but it can also be pieced back together differently. Not to erase what happened, but to build something new on the ruins. I learned that forgiveness is not a single act. It's a series of choices made every day. Some days I chose to forgive Lisa, not because I excused what she did, but because holding on to anger was only hurting me and Jamie. Other days, the resentment flared up again, raw and blinding, and I had to remind myself that healing isn't a straight line. Jamie became both my anchor and my compass. His resilience surprised me. Despite everything, he held on to his innocence and love in ways I hadn't expected. Helping him make sense of the chaos, answering his questions as honestly as I could, even when the truth was complicated, gave me purpose. It reminded me that even when adults stumble, children still need steady ground. My relationship with Lisa evolved into something I never foresaw. We weren't the couple we once were, nor would we ever be. But over countless conversations filled with awkward pauses and tentative honesty, we found a way to coexist, at least for Jamie's sake. There were no guarantees, no promises of reconciliation, only a mutual understanding that some connections, however damaged, deserve a chance to be redefined. Therapy played a crucial role in my journey. Sitting with Dr. Harris, I confronted parts of myself I'd long ignored: pride, denial, fear of failure. I learned to set boundaries, to ask for help, and to accept that vulnerability is not weakness, but a necessary step towards strength. It was hard work, and at times I wanted to give up, but each session chipped away at the walls I'd built around my pain. I also discovered the importance of community. Reaching out to friends and family, letting them in, was terrifying at first, but their support reminded me I wasn't alone. Sometimes, just knowing someone else understood the struggle was enough to keep going. There were losses that couldn't be undone. The life I'd dreamed of with Lisa, the family whole and unbroken, was gone. I grieved that deeply. But I also found unexpected gains, a clearer sense of who I am without the illusions I once clung to, a stronger bond with Jamie forged in adversity, and a newfound capacity for resilience. The house, too, changed in meaning. It no longer felt like a prison or a battleground, but a space where healing could slowly take root. I still see the cracked frame sitting on the shelf, a daily reminder that life isn't perfect, and neither am I. But it also reminds me that broken things can still hold value. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's that life's hardest moments don't define us, they reveal us. They expose what we're made of, what we're willing to fight for, and what we need to let go. It's messy, painful, and unpredictable, but it can also be a beginning. So here I am, still learning, still rebuilding, still imperfect, but moving forward. And I wonder, have you ever faced a moment when everything you thought you knew was shattered? How did you find your way through? Feel free to share your story or thoughts in the comments. Sometimes, the hardest journeys are the ones we travel together.